First I was born, and I was born more sensitive than some kids are. So I was very sensitive to anything psychological. I was able to see what was going on in my mind pretty early age, and I had some experiences of, I guess would be called out of the body experiences, but they were more like transcendental moments of great, I'd say now, very very transparent, where everything became shimmering and transparent. The world that we live in became, you could kind of see through it. And that was a kind of a, left in a mark, didn't ever forget it. And so that started really young. But that also kind of alerted me that this is something, I liked that experience. It was different and it was high. And so that I was on the lookout as I was growing up for that kind of experience again. And I began to, as I got older, gravitate toward any writings, anyone that would talk about these inner experiences. In 1961, I hitchhiked and traveled with Bob Dylan. I was part of a whole group of folk music. There was a whole, basically what was called the circuit. There was a circuit that we hitchhiked from Cambridge, Massachusetts to New York City, to either Oberlin or to Ann Arbor, to Madison or Chicago, to Berkeley and back. And so people were constantly traveling this route. And so I hitchhiked with Dylan for a while, and then in Ann Arbor I helped Dylan put on one of his concerts. It was, I'm told I forgot some of the stuff that someone just reminded me that helped him put on a concert in the Michigan Union in Ann Arbor. And I certainly remember with him, sitting with him in what's called the Mug, the Michigan Union Grill, drinking coffee and him worrying about what was the review, what's going to be, he played the night before and he was really nervous that whether he was going to get a good one or a bad one. He got a good one, and then he went on, hitchhiked out of town, and so went on to the next place that he was going. So I was part of that movement. I never became a really good player. I played guitar, but mostly I hung out with people like Dylan, or I traveled with this guy called Perry Letterman, who was a great instrumentalist. If Dylan and I could know each other today, we both would agree that no one ever played instrumental guitar, what's called Travis style picking, three-finger picking, like Perry Letterman. And he died and really recorded almost nothing, but he could play something that had movements like a symphony, but that was just exquisitely good. He couldn't sing, but he could play. Anyway, to make kind of the long story short, back then, the music, the folk music, we were all trying to preserve folk music because it was dying out, and we would go back to the roots. People like Dylan weren't writing songs of their own. We were all doing songs that were traditional, and we tried to, and if you did a song right, you traced it all the way back to where it came from, Scotland or Ireland, and you did it as authentically, and you preserved it as perfectly as you could. And this also extended with the Newport Blues Festival, Jazz Festival and stuff like that, to blues music, but it was always acoustic country blues. And so we just adopted the same attitude toward blues, that gee, here's a dying music, we should preserve it. And then somewhere along in there, in the middle 60s, not in 1961, not in 1962, it must have been 63 or 64, somewhere along there we realized that blues was not a dying thing, was very much alive. Not only that, but it was just playing across town in a black section, in a bar or something, that just most white people didn't go there. And we began to go there. So we would travel to Chicago, and we'd watch great players like Little Walter play in the south side of Chicago. And his was in a little bar called Teresa's Lounge. And here were great beings, great players, but also kind of beings like you maybe wished your father was, that had so much life experience that just hanging out with them just spending time with them was like an education. And so this became so important to me that I became very, very involved with blues. We started a blues band. But in 1965, the same time that the Grateful Dead in San Francisco started their band, my brother and I started a band in Ann Arbor called the Prime Movers Blues Band. And in the beginning, we were the only band in the Detroit area that was doing blues, and maybe the only band in the Detroit area, or one of few, if I don't know the others, who were part of what we call the new style music. Like Grateful Dead started something. We started at the same time, summer of '65, and Iggy Pop was our drummer for a while. And I haven't seen him in a long time, but he did do a shout out to me a year or so ago in Ann Arbor when one of our friends died, and his guitar player died, Ron Ashton, was a really great guy. And so Iggy remembered the Prime Movers, so both he and Ron were graduates of the Prime Mover. I think I was a pretty exacting boss or leader of the band in terms of practicing. I really believed that you had to do things in a certain way. And so we did. So I studied black music for many, many years. That's all that I did. And I'm a really concentrated kind of guy. I mean, when I study something, I just go all the way. I just do it. And then when I got a chance to meet all these people, I helped to put on the 1969 and 1970 Ann Arbor Blues Festivals. Now, I wasn't part of the group that actually did the physical putting it on. Because I knew some of these players and I'd been around, I was invited to be the person that took care of them behind the scenes, that saw that they had food and they had alcohol, which made me really popular because it was a big drinking thing. But what was so amazing here is that the 1969 festival was the first time that all these great blues players like Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and so forth ever got together as a large mass of people. Maybe in a club there'd be two of them there at the same time, or two or three people, but they never had hundreds of them there, including the band members. And suddenly, here was this music being presented like it never had been to a white audience, mostly. But at the same time, there was a kind of a celebration going on among the black performers with themselves. Here they were, dozens, scores and scores of them, being with each other, being taken care of, being appreciated. So it was like a very special time. And one of the things that I did through that time, and the next year of 1970, and then later 1972 and 3, I interviewed these people, just like you're interviewing me. I did it with audio first, and I did it with video. And so I would, and many of these people had never been invited to something like this. So some of them came like a week before, or almost a week ahead of time. And they were lodged at places like the Michigan League or West Quad. It had nothing to do. So I would, my brother and I would go and sit down with Big Mama Thornton, who wrote Hound Dog, and spend the evening drinking whiskey and getting to know her. Or we'd go, my brother Dan tells me, we went to Arthur Big Boy Crudup, who wrote Elvis's first tune. Knock on his door, he'd come to the door, this big guy, and Dan would take out Jack Daniels and just come on in, boys. And we'd spend the whole night. Or we'd go, Fred McDowell and Yank Rachel were just over in West Quad in a little tiny dorm room. Nothing to do. So we got to know these guys and we got to interview them. And how does this relate to spiritual stuff? And this is how it relates. I respected these men. That I love my father, and I didn't love my teachers much. Very few people, I'm hard to educate. I never got out of high school. I'd much rather just go. I was ready to go out into the world and just have some experience. I didn't need any teaching. So that the mentors that I had, I've been very, very careful about. I don't learn from just anyone. I learn from people that I respect their life experience. That they show me that they know what they're talking about. They're not just talking. So the only problem I had with all these blues guys was that, most of them drank too much. I mean, to their own death, and very unhealthy. So that that whole part of them, and of course there's all the reasons why that was so, that could be another whole thing, but it's sad, you know, prejudice, and they're being held back, and they all knew everything about all of this. So somewhere along in there, I got, I think it was 1974, I met a Tibetan Lama by the name of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and he founded Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. And here was the same kind of wisdom that I saw in these black performers. And they also drank too, but there wasn't, yeah, they weren't down and out. They weren't trying to survive, they were surviving. So suddenly I was getting this, realized that a lot of what I saw in black music, because I love the music to this day, every little bit of it. And so when I met, when I began to get into the Tibetan Rinpoches, I met the kind of person that had this incredible knowledge of life, but also was just the pure spiritual stuff. A lot of it I was taking from the wisdom of the black performers, but here I was just getting it without all of the, without the music, without the alcohol, without the problems, and all the suffering that was involved there. And I've been in, you know, from that point onward, I became more and more interested in just how the mind works.